Today I want to talk about the VOW Creatine Chews and the reasons why we made the chews. These are one of the really kind of important products to me. Creatine is something I use, and I'm going to go into the reasons why. But firstly, why did we make chews? Why did we make them like that hard sweets? A mint chew and strawberry flavored and so on. Well, when we first started looking at this concept, we started looking into the market, and the other option was creatine gummies. So we started looking at these type of products. And prior to that, we had looked at making a creatine drink. And then we realized that creatine wasn't very soluble. And that meant actually over time, when creatine is mixed with water, there ends up being virtually no creatine or zero creatine in the product. And we went as far as actually trying to find the most soluble creatine in the market, to see if we could get a drink to last potentially, longer than 6 months and still maintain some creatine in the product. In the end, it was the fact that we had to use such a ridiculously high level of creatine that in 6 months there would be still 3 grams of creatine remaining in the product. It just wasn't cost effective. Hence, you just couldn't make the product. So when we started looking at how gummies are formed using a hard liquid press. That hard liquid press means that the creatine has to be mixed with liquid. Over time, the creatine starts to vanish. We would then tested those products in the lab, and then what we found, most of the products we tested had zero creatine. Some of them had creatine, but incredibly low levels of creatine and much lower than what was advertised on the pack. Now, I'm not criticizing the brands that did this, because the brands that did this probably wasn't aware that there wasn't creatine in the product, because creatine probably was put in the product on day 1, day 60, there wasn't anything left. And that was the reason that took us down the route of making the hard, sweet, chewable. So it's actually more like a proper supplement, a proper sports supplement and a proper dietary supplement. The other thing is when we're mixing the creatine with the dextrose, like we do in these products, creatine has a bigger upload into the blood system because of the sugar spike created from the dextrose. Creatine since it began and since it was first being tested many years ago, it was always suggested that creatine should be taken with an orange juice, something that gives you a sugar spike to upload creatine into the bloodstream much quicker. So that's why we decided on using a small amount of dextrose in each of the chew to help upload creatine into the bloodstream. Kind of unlike gummies that don't really work. So that was the reason why we went down the route and why we didn't go down the route of gummies, which actually would have been much easier and actually probably would have been more cost effective. But one of the vows, if you like, and the missions of the brand under those vows is to create, proper, good quality, high level sports supplements, good enough for the elite, but we also found to be good enough for everybody else. Creatine is one of the most tested supplements in the world, and it's one of the proven supplements. It's got proven claims, especially in sport, and originally they're proven to make you more powerful, give you more endurance when exercising, and so on. So we've known that creatine works for years, but we also know creatine is one of the most important amino acids for many reasons. And there's a lot of new research coming out now about how creatine is beneficial to kind of brain health. It's been under tests. There's been a lot of proof that children that suffer with autism actually have a lack of creatine on the brain, and actually with a creatine supplement can actually maybe level out some of these things. But it's also been found recently that it's highly effective in women for hormones, menopause, and so many issues. And there's so much research out there now that you can look into that will actually tell you the reasons why creatine can affect so many different parts of your life. But the truth of it is creatine should really come from meat, and you can still get creatine from beef, especially if it's quite rare. And you can get creatine from fish, mainly sushi. The reason for this is the moment an animal dies, the creatine in the animal starts to dissolve almost instantly. So by the time that meat has ended up on the shelf in the supermarket, the level of creatine in that product is probably zero. But creatine is one of the most important amino acids that you need. So that's why supplementing creatine is so important. And to be honest with you, for me, I've studied this for absolutely years now, over a decade, because I used it myself at a very high level when I was doing natural bodybuilding. It's actually so good now that there's proper proof out there, and there's people talking about why creatine is one of the most important amino acids that everybody, including children, men, women, not just people that are exercising, should be taking.